On behalf of the Pioneer Historical Society and Modern Woodman Insurance Company, I want to welcome you to the Telfair Center for the Arts. We are presenting an onstage version of our cemetery walk. Cemetery reenactments are another form of keeping the past from fading away by continuing to tell the stories of the dearly or infamously departed. The words beloved wife and mother hardly tell the full story. Most of us pass by graveyards never knowing the stories of the people laid to rest there. It is the aim of the Pioneer Historical Society to keep the story of the people buried in Oak Grove Cemetery alive for our generation and the next. Our two prior cemetery reenactments have been made in the Oak Grove Cemetery itself. This year, we are bringing those reenactments to the comfortable auditorium at the historical Telfair Center for the Arts. At this time, we'd like to present an on-stage version of Walk Through Telfair's Past, a living history presentation.
Oh, wait a minute, I'm coming. Hold on, I'm coming. I'm sorry I'm late. I had to borrow this dress because I didn't get to wear one on my wedding night. My name is Necia Powell Cotter. I was born August the 10th, 1908 to the parents of Mary and Charles Powell from Alena, which was called at that time Potter Hill. Now, I was the only child. My mother spent a lot of time with me. She taught me the history of music and art. Now, it would be on maybe a Saturday afternoon, you would come by my house, and I would be in my mother's garden painting. I was an artist. Now, I was one of a few South Georgia honor students that graduated from South Georgia College. Also graduated from Florida Southern University. I got a certificate in music and a diploma in art. Now, when I was 30, I met my true love. I know back in them days they would have said I was an old maid, but let me tell you, I waited for him. He was my true love, William Edward Cotter. He was 40. He was my true love. Gotta get a little dust out of these lungs. I've been in the ground for over 100 years. Now, on October the 26th, on a Wednesday night, 1938, me and Eddie was out with some friends. We decided after a long night, we were gonna get married. We went to the Justice of the Peace and we got married. So we were gonna go by my house and get some clothes to go to Eddie's house. When we did, we went inside, and by my surprise, my dad was still up. We're talking about Wednesday night at 10:30 at night. So Eddie went over and he told my dad that we were gotten married. And he even showed him the wedding license. So my dad stood up. He looked at me, and I looked at him. And he said, bang! He shot me. They started wrestling over the gun back and forth. All of a sudden, bang, bang, two more shots went off. One went wild, the other glazed Eddie in the shoulder. All of a sudden, the front door slammed open. Here come running Robert in. He was wrestling with him. He got the gun. He slung it in the front yard. I took one more step, and I passed out. Well, they said they took me to Dr. Mann, and he patched me up, and they sent me to Macon, and that's where I was unconscious for several days. But I woke up, and when I woke up, my true love, Eddie, was still beside my side. I figured he had hauled off and run off and left me after all that, but he didn't. He stayed with me, and he was there the whole entire time. Well, I got ready to go home, so Eddie had took me to 93 College Street, right up the street from here. The house still stands today. And when you ride by and look at the front porch, to the right of it used to be a room, and that's where I stayed until I was healed. Well, the Cotter estate had went up for sale, and Eddie loved that house so much he purchased it, and we went in and restored the whole entire house. And my famous was the dining room. I did the 4 seasons, one on each wall. My famous season was the Dahlonega Fall, where the famous Georgia pines, the deers with the little streams. I could stand here and talk about that house all day long. We had imported art sent in from around the world. That whole house was decorative. It was beautiful. Well, now, if Eddie couldn't take me to work, I would walk to work. That's how close I was. I was a school teacher for 30 years for Telfair County School Board. I was your teacher, and your teacher. Yes, I was. Matter of fact, I had run into one of my students later on in life, and he told me he still had that little mallard duck we painted in art on his dresser, Thomas. He sure did. And I was proud of that, knowing that I had made that much of my students. Well, later on in life, Eddie had gotten sick and passed away, and I was devastated. Didn't know what to do. So my friends told me I needed to get active. So I did. I got active in the Methodist Church. I got active in the Telfair Art Association. I even bought the audio system in the Methodist Church and put it in my Eddie's name. I kept him alive as much as possible. I even was a charter member of the Pioneer Historical Society. I went all the way to Atlanta and hired Dr. Joseph Steele and and financed this drop curtain that Dr. Joseph Steele painted, one of a kind. And as you see, it stands today. Isn't it beautiful? And I donated this in my Eddie's name because he loved the arts. Isn't it just beautiful? Now, I was getting old, and I was getting ready to leave this house of mine. And I knew this house meant so much to me and Eddie, and I couldn't take care of it no more. But I wanted the next person that come this way to take care of this house and know how much it meant to me. So I left a poem on the wall, and I'd like to read it to you today. It says, "Walk through this house that I hold in trust, and be with who will come when I'm at dust. And may they treat it tenderly and respectfully in the memory of my husband." Well, you know, the house still stands today, and this is on the wall of the house today. Isn't that a miracle? They still take care of this house. Now, I went into a nursing home, and I passed away May the 27th, 1993. I lay in tomb next to my beloved Eddie again in Oak Grove Cemetery. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. I have not seen this many people in one place since I was entertaining back in the day. As I am sure you are aware, humanity loves to talk about itself, and I suppose I am no exception to that rule. I am Floris Jeanette Perkins Mann, born October the 6th, 1885 in Chesterfield County, South Carolina. I was orphaned at an early age, and my siblings and I went to live with the brother of my father, who was engaged in the manufacture of turpentine in Douglas, Georgia. Books and learning have always been very important to me. I began my education 1 month shy of my 3rd birthday, and I was in 2nd grade by age 5. I graduated from South Georgia Normal School. then went to Brunel for a year, after which I had a hiatus in Mississippi. Then I went to Boston to pursue music education at the Boston Conservatory and oratory at Emerson College. Now, I have heard it said that when a young lady changes schools that frequently, it's because she keeps getting expelled. Well, I will neither confirm nor deny such rumors, but it may have had something to do that while I was in college, I allowed a Maharaja to pursue courtship of me. He was a lovely man, but I could not see a conclusion to that relationship which was going to prove pleasing to both of us over time. So I ended it. I am aware that my cigarette is not actually lit. Since I am dead, I can't inhale anyway, but old habits die hard, I guess. I would remind you that smoking was considered a social grace and was not demoted to a vice until the 1960s. What does the younger generation know anyway? Medical science says that it is injurious to one's health, but it's not like it can kill me now, is it? The 1909 Telfair Enterprise announcement of the engagement of myself and W.S. Mann made it sound as if we had had a whirlwind romance, but it was nothing so vulgar as that. W.S. Mann and I had known each other for 4 years before he decided to propose. And we decided, as reasonable people of a certain class would do, that we'd been in love for those 4 years. Of course, it probably didn't hurt that I was about to move back to Mississippi. That probably spurred him on when he might have otherwise bided his time a while longer. I was welcomed to Telfair County as an exceptionally attractive young lady with many charms of person and of heart, who will at once win her way into the hearts of our people. And I was, of course, all those things. As the wife of an important attorney who was both influential and affluent in the community, I endeavored to bring the community to new heights of social involvement and awareness. I founded local chapters of many prestigious organizations, such as the DAR, and quite naturally, as founder of each, I was elected president of each. I liked to keep busy. I began to do research and started working on my first published work, A Telfair County History. This book is available in the Telfair County Library, where my great-grandson, Norwood Davidson, is the director. I have heard it said recently that Telfair County is among the poorest in the nation. I am sure that this name is very disturbing to many of you, but it is also quite ridiculous that this county should be so named. As I wrote in my book, Telfair County has lush forest, rich soil, abundant rainfall, good clear streams, good fishing, and topography beneficial for cultivation and for grazing. By all means, seize the opportunity this good county affords you. W.S. Mann and I had 3 children: W.S. Mann Jr., Aleph Hortense Mann, and Janet Mann. W.S. Jr. followed in his father's footsteps in the practice of law in McRae. And I had named Aleph Hortense After my husband's sister, Aleph, a lovelier woman never walked the face of the earth. And after my beloved sister, Hortense. But for some reason, my daughter did not like the name Aleph Hortense. So she changed it. She changed her name to Doll. Now, she was a doll, but really. However ridiculous this notion may have seemed to the rest of her family, she had absolutely no trouble effectuating the change. You see, my daughter, Doll, was also an attorney. This is a time when that was a very unusual profession for a woman. She was, in fact, the first female member of the Oconee Judicial Circuit Bar. The second female lawyer in the Oconee Judicial Circuit was Laurel Briggs Straughan in 1983. W.S. Jr. had two daughters, Jane Mann Davidson and Kay Mann Rogers. Jane produced a son, Sim Davidson, and a son, Norwood Mann Davidson. Sim has three lovely girls, Emily, Merritt, and Millie. Although my husband and I loved all of our offspring fervently, we did not believe in ostentatious displays of affection. I cannot recall a time when any of my grandchildren sat in my lap. But that doesn't mean they did not know I loved them. This was in large part because I had very strong opinions on what was best for them. For example, as a prestigious member of local society, I wanted to raise my offspring to be prepared for their positions in life. I believe that all young ladies of refinement should be able to play bridge and play it well. Therefore, I insisted that all of my granddaughters be proficient in bridge. From the time they could hold the requisite number of cards in one hand, they were always on call to play bridge with me. One of my granddaughters suggested that this was so I had a captive bridge team with whom to play and whom to beat. But it was really for their own good, so they could function in society. Now, that said, I was rarely beaten. I would confuse and distract my opponents by suddenly bursting into song or by making up new rules that I would resolutely insist were true. One of my favorite methods of distraction was to put my cigarette in the corner of my mouth where I would leave it. My opponents would be mesmerized watching that ash grow longer and longer and longer, waiting for it to drop to the spotless linen tablecloth. But I would always flick it in the bridge ashtray at the very last moment, thereby averting catastrophe. I do have one complaint to level against my beloved county. Hardly anyone plays bridge here anymore. I consider this to be absolute proof of the degradation of the very bedrock of society. But it's not just you. I understand that the New York Times has stopped running its bridge column. I cannot tell you how distressing this is to me. None of the ladies here anymore will play bridge with me. Not because they are dead, but because I have beaten them so many times they have given it up. Cowards. Now, I am not trying to rush anyone along, but I understand there is a Marjorie Birch who lives on 3rd Avenue near where I spent my entire married life, who is a worthy opponent. I look forward to the competition and the conquest. After my husband died, I decided to more fully embrace my natural tendency to a refined and controlled carpe diem, or seize the day. I took many trips to Europe, which led to my second published work, European Merry-Go-Round, which is also available at the local library. On my trip to France, it began with an ocean voyage. One of the passengers there was a minister who felt compelled to warn us of the sinful shoals upon which we would be landing, as well as remind us of our tenuous mortality by dramatic reminders of the Lusitania, the Titanic, and the Andrea Doria. It was no wonder he was avoided by all for the remainder of the voyage. However, once we arrived, it became clear that the sins with which we had been cautioned were not altogether false. Our group went nightclubbing, which includes locations where extreme nudity is the norm. As the young ladies stripped down to their bare assets, we began to cover our eyes. Although, truth be told, most of us began to look through very large cracks in our fingers. Visitors, please take my advice. Love your family. Love your county. Don't count yourself out in the waning years of your life. And for goodness sake, take a bridge.
Welcome, folks. May I have order in the court. I just love saying that. I'm the Honorable Judge Eschol Wayne Graham, born right here in McRae, September 18th, 1873, to Duncan Campbell and Josephine McDuffie. Had a great childhood, growing up on the farm with Daddy, 4 brothers and sisters. Daddy taught us everything he knew about farming. So when I graduated from McRae, I decided I'd go to North Georgia Agriculture College up there in Dahlonega. Folks, let me tell you, learning from Daddy and listening to a professor teach it just wasn't quite the same. So I'd been interested in law, so I transferred to the University of Georgia Law School. You know, I graduated with the BL degree in 1899. I loved McRae. I came back here, practiced law with my cousin E.D. Graham, 21 years. I married Ava Mae Smith. 1906, we had one son, Duncan Campbell, named after Daddy. Everything was going good. Nice town, good job. 8 years later, Ava died. I was devastated. Didn't know what to do. 41 years old, single dad. Just didn't know if I could go on. But you know, 3 short years later, I'd met and married Frankie Williams. Now, she was a school teacher right here in McRae. We had one daughter together, Josephine Elizabeth, named after Mama. I was active in the Methodist Church, Board of Trustees, even taught men's Bible school for several years. I was mayor of McRae, 1901-1902. Member of the House of Representatives, 1905-1906. I was appointed judge of the City Court of McRae, 1909, where I resigned 1914. Excuse me, folks. Sand's still coming up in me. Anyhow, I'd like to tell you a few things that I spent learning on the law of the law on the bench and in court. Do what you know to be right and keep your talking short. Your words can't be used against you if you don't say them out loud. Now, you know, it can be hard to maintain order in the courtroom. You have plaintiffs, defendants who seemed intent on cutting the fool, saying scandalous things in court. And you sometimes have the proverbial dog and pony show. I had to write this stuff down because memory's just not good like it used to be. I remember one attorney, Lovett Harrell. He was giving Miss Burkhalter a fit, up and down, constantly, cross-examining, really abusive. Her attorney would come in, try to object. After about the 10th objection, I asked him, I says, Harrell, you have to stop maligning Miss Burkhalter's character. You know, he took a deep breath, looked down at his shoes, looked back up at me, said, Your Honor, I wasn't aware Miss Burkhalter had any character. Another thing, you can't always trust people to do what's right, even family. There was this lady, she bought a big house in McRae, a shotgun house. Every room led to the next. She had her aunt move in. She had a daughter. Another room, she let her sister move in. Her husband, they had children. Finally, in the back room was another sister, the husband, and more children. Well, things was going okay, a little noisy in the house. One day, the husband's got a hold of some bootleg liquor. That's right, the husband's got a hold of it. They was hooping and hollering, lasted about, an hour or so. Of course, the neighbor, he had heard it. That was enough for him. They'd passed out. So neighbor called the revenuers the next day. He brought in some deputies. And they come into the house, looked around, all the liquor still all over the house. Deputy asked, whose liquor is this? The aunt, of course it wasn't hers. The sisters, the husbands, no, we wouldn't do such a thing, not in front of our children. The other sister and the husband said the same thing. So what they did was they charged the homeowner, because nobody else would admit to it, for having illegal liquor. She spent 30 days in jail and $200 fine. You know, you just can't do good things for some people. There was another case. You know, any of y'all know Mr. Smith? Probably not. He's probably gone by now. But he made an enemy out of everybody. He was terribly hard to get along with. He would lie, cheat, and steal, and insult everybody. Well, he had that big old farm outside of McRae. One day, Whitaker, down on his luck, he went in there and confiscated one of his cows. Well, Whitaker, he was trying to plan ahead. He went out and painted the cow, trying to disguise it. Well, Smith, you know, you can't fool him. So he had the guy arrested, put him in jail. We had a court by jury. Everything was going good, but Smith forgot to realize that not too many people cared about him. So the jury, they deliberated for about 15 minutes, came back, said, Your Honor, we find the defendant guilty, and he has to give back the cow. I told him, I said, wait a minute, this will never do. Go back and re-deliberate. So, you know, they come back 2 minutes later, found the defendant not guilty, and he gets to keep the cow. Well, I was elected Superior Court Judge of the Oconee Judicial Circuit in 1920. I was elected and re-elected 8 times, 4-year terms, serving 32 years continuous service in the state of Georgia, making me the oldest point-of-service judge in Georgia. Because of ill health, I retired April 1955. They made me Judge Emeritus, which, you know, I had a title, but I really wasn't able to do anything on the bench until I finally died September 1955. Now, they had a memorial inscribed in the minutes of each of the 7 courts I presided in for more than 34 years. I'd like to read it to you now, if I may. This was a man who was a profound scholar with a vast knowledge of the law, its scope, intent, and application. a man who possessed great strength of character, honesty, and was fearless physically, morally, and politically. One who was not swayed by philosophies or ideologies, but who conducted his courts justly and honestly, and never allowed personalities to play a part in determining the rights of litigants before him. Neither wealth, poverty, or adverse public opinion could influence him in the administration of the law and justice according to his convictions. He could not tolerate what he considered an injustice. He was inflexibly against all the evils and harmful practices which affected adversely the lives of people of his state and community, and waged unceasing warfare against them in his public utterances. Excuse me again. You know, I lived up there on the corner of 3rd and Graham. Big old white house up there. It still stands today. And, you know, even though they talked good about me in the minutes of the proceedings there's people in town that talk bad about me. Said, hey, there's a secret door in his house. He has people come up and try to influence money and illegal liquor. Well, you know, no matter how good some people think you are, other people are going to think badly of you. So, but to be honest with you, I did love my liquor. Court dismissed.
Thank you. Oh my goodness. Where are we? Oh my, look at all these fine folks. What?
Edna.
Hello, dear.
How you doing?
It's so wonderful to see
It's
you
so
again.
great to
How
see
I have
you.
missed you. What should we do? I know. Let's
we should
introduce
introduce
ourselves.
My name's Alexis Clay Ryals, Senior. I was born February 12, 1878. I was the son of Mary Arthur Ryals, and I was the son of late Dr. Henry Ryals of McRae, Georgia. And this would be my wife, Edna. Introduce yourself, dear.
Yes, dear. Thank you so much. Yes, my name is Miss Edna Williams-Ross, and I was born on November the 10th in 1891. November the 10th. Goodness, what is today's date?
You just had a birthday.
If I'd have lived, I'd be 130 years old today. And I am from Montgomery County, which is just right down the road near Mount Vernon, Georgia, which I'm sure everyone is familiar with. It's about 22 miles from here. And if you were to take an automobile ride, it would probably take you, what, 15, 20 minutes? But back in the day,
It took us a while.
it took us quite a while to go by horse and carriage. But now my parents, my mother was Edith Calhoun Williams, and my father was Henry Hora Williams. Now, my mother passed when I was 14 years old, and, you know, father, and me being an only child, he was faced with the decision of how to continue raising such a young daughter and preparing her for a future life as one day a wife and a homemaker. And my mother had a sister here in McRae, Georgia, and her name was Leah Wilcox. She was married to Mr. George Wilcox. Father wrote to Aunt Lee and Uncle George and asked if they would help finishing my education. And of course, they said they would be glad to do so. So when I was 14, Father and I, we hitched up our horse and buggy. We left Montgomery County and headed to my new home in McRae and my community in Telfair. And, you know, again, back then, 22 miles, horse and buggy. It took us about 5 to 6 hours. And that's stopping, letting our horse have a rest, packing a picnic along the way so that we could, you know, just rest for a while, and then arriving here in McRae, Georgia, and taking residence up with Aunt and Uncle George. They welcomed me with open arms. My education was continued under the very watchful eye of Aunt Leah. And at 14 years old, it wasn't long afterwards that I moved here. That gentleman came calling, and one in particular caught my eye. And it was my dear husband here, who was affectionately known here in the community of Telfair as Bud. And Bud was a very eligible bachelor.
And very successful.
Yes, you were, Bud. Would you
I
like to
always
share?
said to myself that I would never marry till I was very successful. I own a feed business here in McRae, Georgia, where I would help the people of McRae. And you got to remember now, we was in depression. We would tell you, I'd give them feed. They'd give me a few chickens or whatever they wanted to pay for their feed. We all worked together in the community to help each other.
That's right.
We cared about each other.
Yes, we did.
And I also had in the surrounding counties, I took care of all the county mules. And they would loan them out to people that needed mules to help them plow their fields. And then they would take their mules out and just plow all day. Think about it, people. I heard y'all had Maggie first and the big tractor today. Take y'all about, what, an hour to plow 2 acres? If you took 2 mules to plow 2 acres, it'd take you a day and a half. So you got to remember, we had to help each other. Without each other, we would have never made it.
That's right. Yes, we did. We were a very close-knit community, and again, had a very eligible bachelor come knocking. And folks, we had a long, proper courtship, not compared to what you young folks do today. You call it dating. We called it courting. And again, we were never alone, were we, Bud?
Never got no sugar on the side.
But we did take many long horse and buggy rides all over Telfair County, and everyone was used to seeing us and was all in favor of our courting. We had many dinners with you and Mother Ryals and over at Aunt Lee and Uncle George's house, even attended church together a few times. And it wasn't long thereafter that my dear Bud proposed, and we got married on January the 8th in 1908 here in McRae at the McRae Baptist Church, which many of you know today as the McRae First Baptist Church. And I remember it like it was yesterday, Bud.
It was cold.
It was a cold Wednesday. But it was the event of the season, that's right. Everybody wanted to be there. And Bud, goodness, you were 30 years old. And how old was I when we got married?
You were 16, and today, if you are 30 years old and mess with a 16-year-old, you're going to prison.
But
I felt honored. Think about it. I'm 30 years old and have a 16-year-old wife. It made every man feel good.
And y'all, back then it was considered very acceptable, but Bud is absolutely correct. In your time today, it would be very unacceptable. But we did go when we moved into
My
Bud's
mother's house.
Yes, he did.
2
Mother
women
Ryals.
in one house.
That's right. We did have a few moments, but we made it work, and it wasn't long after that we started growing a family. And we did have 5 children, but I did lose 1. And y'all, we just didn't discuss those things back then in our day, not like you do today. But we did have 4 children. Our eldest was Edith, our only daughter, followed by 3 sons. And Edith was born in December of 1909. That's right, not long after we got married, followed by her brother, Junior, Henry Clay, and then our son Wilbur, and then followed lastly by our baby Jack, who was born in 1915. So we had a nice, robust family, and Bud was off, as he mentioned, with all of his many different business enterprises here in McRae. Your cotton warehouse, which was down on, gosh, where was it?
It was 4th and Oak.
4th and Oak Street, that's right. And right now, everyone's harvesting cotton, but you could just imagine. It was, and that cotton warehouse would be filled full, and the overflow would just be lining the streets. Y'all, it was something to see, something to see. And then his feed business, as he mentioned, he had all the local county contracts for all those county-owned mules, and they would lease those out to the farmers, and Bud headed that as well. And then you did have a grist mill too, Bud, and
yes, I did. Very
busy. And it wasn't long after that some of you could wish you could retire this early today.
I retired in 1931. I was 53 years old.
53 years of age. But we did live here in town in McRae, and back then as well, we had the railway that came through. And there were many times that weary travelers would be headed through on business or just simply traveling with nowhere to stay. You have to remember that we didn't have a lot of the conveniences that you have today. It was mainly farmland. And so they would travel through, and people here in McRae would just simply open their homes to complete strangers. It was very appropriate to do then, and that's what we did. And of course, I love to cook.
If you open your home now to strangers, you may not have nothing in your house if you leave them there.
That's true how times have changed. But I did love to cook and I love to bake, and I have to say, I was famous for my pies. Bud loved my apple pie especially. And we would have warm, hospitable dinners, inviting guests, and we even had a couple of renters periodically. And traditionally, folks would come often and stay with us. After dinner, we would relax out on our front porch in our rocking chairs and our swing, and we would tell stories and talk about our travels and people we'd meet. And but do you remember the one story that we talked about for years to come?
Put Telfair County,
Telfair
McRae,
County
Georgia,
on the map.
And it was little George Perry. Anybody know what little George did?
He was 19-year-old, just a local simple farm boy. He was out fishing one day.
Let me tell you what he did. He caught a bass, 22 pounds and 4 ounces. The bass was 28 inches round, 32.5 feet long, inches long. And that's what put McRae on the map.
And he had it recorded down in Helena.
At the post office.
At the post office, that's right. It's all coming back, y'all. It has been a while. And he recorded it officially.
So it means that it was a big largemouth bass, which is our state fish in Georgia's largemouth bass.
Because of little old George's fish. And again, as Bud said earlier, y'all, this was back during the Great Depression. It was tough times. You just didn't run to what you have today, a Piggly Wiggly or a Harvey's or even a petrol station or a gas station to pick up something, a gallon of milk or a loaf of bread. Times were hard. And all of our community residents helped each other. And little George that day, he just went out fishing. Gosh, do we dare tell him where it was caught?
It was caught in Montgomery Lake.
Right off the old Muggy River. Yes.
And it's landlocked today, so don't be sticking there trying to fish.
Sorry, y'all. It is landlocked today. But little George, he just went out that day, 19-year-old poor farm boy, and he caught this record fish. And yes, had it recorded down here in Helena at the post office at the time, and it was a world record. A world record, y'all, set right here in Telfair County. And Field and Stream, was it? Magazine.
Come down here and awarded him for catching the world record.
First prize. First
What
prize.
was the first prize? $75.
$75, y'all. That's a lot of money. That's a good fair bit of money in your time today. But in our time back then, that was a lot of money.
That was depressing.
So could you imagine little George, who was just simply out trying to put food on his family's table, who was basically just a poor old farm boy? Overnight, he became famous. Everyone wanted to come to town and have their picture made with poor little George. But again, a world record, and as what, Bud, if you caught what he said, because of little George's catch being a world record here in Telfair County, because of his catch, it became Telfair County's state fish and for the state of Georgia. So again, what a story that we would tell and recall and regale again and again on our front porch with all of our many guests who came through.
But little George, he didn't mount that fish like we do today. Little George eat that fish. Because it was back when times were hard.
Yes, he did.
Nobody
bless
back
George.
then could put a fish on the wall like we do and pay hundreds of dollars.
No, unheard of.
Unheard of.
That would have been waste,
Yes,
an
sir.
absolute waste.
It sure will. And I told that story many times on our front porch at our boarding house. I tell you what y'all know as a bed and breakfast, now we had a boarding house. You know, we just took care of people. We fed them breakfast, dinner, and supper. And we all just got that kind of hospitality. My mom makes some apple pies, and they was great. But I got sick. In September 1965, I died. I left my beloved wife here to take care of her boarding house without me.
It was, and y'all, my dear Bud was gone from that point on, and we had been married 57 years when Bud died. And he was 87 when he did pass. But as we mentioned previously, I was 15 years younger than Bud, and now I was a proper widow. And it was considered traditional for folks to still travel through McRae, Telfair County, and stay with us. And so that continued for many years to come, and I proudly continued to run that business. And y'all, it wasn't long after that, I got my driver's license. and I got me a big Buick. And I traveled all over McRae, and when people saw me coming, they thought, oh Lord, here comes Miss Edna. You better get out of the way. Because when I had somewhere to go, I got there fast. And y'all, again, it wasn't long after that I actually drove myself to the hospital before I died. And I died on January 21st, 1983. I was 92 years old. And we just really had an amazing life together. It was very robust here in Telfair County, and we loved every minute of it with our children and their marriages and their grandchildren as well. But remember this, we have left each and every one of y'all with a fun fact that you get to go home tonight and share with your dinner guests. Thank y'all so much.
Thank y'all.
This concludes our first act of this program. We hope you've enjoyed it.
Good afternoon. My name is Essie Ray Sandys McGinty. I was born July the 11th, 1899, to the parents of Mary and Charles McGinty. Now, when we moved to Dodge County, I met Truman McGinty. We had a misunderstanding when we were sweethearts. I was 17 and he was 18. Now, when I get into a misunderstanding, I get over it in a couple of days. Not Truman. He got into a misunderstanding with me. He signed up for the Army. He went overseas for 3 years in combat. He left me. But when he come back, he got a hold of me and he found out he was still in love with me, so he married me. He sure did. And while we were here in Georgia, we had one child, and that was Robert Carlson. Jobs were hard to come by after that, so Truman, he couldn't find a job, so he signed up for Firestone, which took us to Akron, Ohio. So we loaded up the truck, and we moved to Akron, Ohio. Now, while we was in Akron, Ohio, we had 3 more children. We had Dee, Betty, and Jack Earl. Now, we were there for a while to have 3 children, but we longed to come back to Georgia. Now, one day when Truman come home, he said he had found him a reason to come back to Georgia. And I asked him, what was it? He said he found him a restaurant to buy. Well, Essie didn't cook, so Truman did all the cooking at the house, so that was a good reason to come back to Helena. So we loaded up the truck once again, and we moved to Helena. And we bought that restaurant, and we called it McGinty's Cafe. Well, things were going good for a while, then all of a sudden the Depression stepped in. Well, nobody wanted to come to the cafe. They couldn't afford to buy no dinners. So Truman had to go back to Firestone, which carried him all the way back up to Akron, Ohio. That left Essie running the restaurant. And that's what I did, run the restaurant, because I did no cooking. We had a cook, and I hired Mr. Willie. Now, Mr. Willie, I bought him a white jacket, and he would go outside the cafe. He would flag the people in and let them help them park. Then he would open up the door and let them in. So that was doing pretty good. We'd get a few business in, but then we was by the railroad system. The railroad system, they'd get off and come in the cafe. And Essie invented something that was only in her restaurant, which was called the chicken in the box, and it flew right out the door. I'm telling you, they'd get off that train, come in, and they'd buy that chicken in the box, get on that train, and there they'd go. Well, business started doing good. Jobs started coming back. Well, Truman come back home. He started cooking. Well, he started getting famous. He got famous for his barbecue sandwich with mayonnaise on it. Ooh, that sounds terrible, but he got famous for it. It was good. He got famous for his Blue Plate special. He got famous, and if you didn't get on his list on the Christmas pie, you didn't get one because he only made so many of them. Well, Truman was doing good. Essie was in her Lincoln riding around town, delivering for him, picking up for him, delivering for him, until one day when Essie was in town, she run into Minnie Palmer. Now, Minnie Palmer owned a flower shop in town, and she was selling it because she wanted to go back to Americas to be with her family. So Essie thought, that's just what I want to do. I want to do flowers. And I checked in some stuff while I was in there, and I found out they were giving flower courses. So when I got home that afternoon, I thought, this is what I want. So when Truman got home and everything settled down at the house, me and him had a little talk. And I told him, I said, Truman, this is what I want to do. You got the cafe, you got famous for all yours, and all I want to do is just a flower shop. And you know what Truman did? He bought me that flower shop. I sure did. I was so excited, and I did what I told Truman I was going to do. I went in there and I took them flower classes, and guess what I did? I run into Nettie Williams. Now, Nettie Williams, she used to work into a flower business, and I hired Nettie Williams because she was looking for a job. Me and Nettie Williams come up just like this. We became friends. So she started working for me in the flower shop business. Well, it was going good. Everything was. There was a piece of land on sale over here on 3rd Street. I think they call it now C.J. Floris. Well, we bought that, and we had that built there. We had the house built up front, then you go down and back and had the flower shop built. That used to be ours. Sure was. Well, we moved over there, and we got it built, and everything was going fine. The McGinty's were doing great. The cafe was doing great. The flower shop was doing great. So let me tell you what a typical day of Essie's is. I'll get up in the morning time, put on my girdle, put on my stockings, and my 3-piece suit. Because my mama always told me, you did not go out in public unless you were well dressed. Because the first thing people do is they look at you, and if you're well dressed, everything's nice. But if you don't, they don't socialize with you. Essie's always dressed. She'd go in that kitchen, and she gave options to her kids for breakfast. She gave them choices, 3 choices, because Essie don't cook: cereal, oatmeal, and toast. And that's it, and I'd get them off to school. Oh, wait a minute, let me tell you, picture this. My grandson, little Ricky, and a gold can of spray paint. Could you imagine what he could do with it? Well, let me tell you what he did with it. Me and Nettie in the flower shop, and we making flower arrangements. And you know how little kids are. One minute you're there, and next minute you're gone. Well, that's pretty much what happened that day. We was making flower arrangements, and he was there coloring. I turned my head back, and he was gone. I sent Nettie upstairs. I said, go find little Ricky. Next thing you know, I heard Nettie go, woo! I had to go upstairs to see what she was looking at. I went upstairs and I went, oh my God, I couldn't believe what I saw. And little Ricky run over and he said, ain't that pretty, Mimi? No, it wasn't pretty. I got on the phone. I said, Truman. He said, what, Essie? I said, Truman. He said, Essie, is it an emergency? I said, Truman, it's an emergency. He said, what's going on? I said, little Ricky took a gold can of spray paint and sprayed it all the way down my Lincoln. He said, Essie, that's no emergency. I'll talk to you when I get home. Clink. Well, y'all, to me, it was an emergency. It was my Lincoln. And do you know what Truman did the next day? He bought me a brand new Lincoln. Yes, he did. And do you know what I did when I seen little Ricky? I hugged him and loved him and told him thank you. I sure did. Oh, I sure did. Now, me and Essie was Essie and me. That's me. Sure is. We are having a good old day with that Lincoln. We was out driving it, riding in town, doing it. Now, what I had to do was build this flower shop up good. And I was thinking, now, how could I do it? Now, me and Nettie was thinking, and I thought, we got the cafe. So we made flower arrangements and put into the cafe. Everybody thought we put the flowers into the cafe to make the cafe look good. Well, we did really in kind of a way, but we put them in there for people to look at, for they would buy it from us. And it worked. The phone was ringing off the hook. People were ordering flowers from the flower shop. Me and Nettie was busy. That was a smart business arrangement. Now, things were going good for the McGinty's. The cafe was doing good. The flower shop was doing good. You couldn't ask for nothing no better. Then all of a sudden, Truman got up and passed away. Bless his soul. But he left it all to me. I could not run the cafe, and I could not run the flower shop. So I called Jack Earl, and I said, Jack, Jack Earl's my son and his wife Jane. They were CPAs, and they did the books for both those. I said, I can't run this. What am I going to do? He said, well, both of it is doing good, Mom. You need to sell. I said, well, I can't sell the flowers. I live there. He said, well, Mom, I heard about the Baptist villages down in Brunswick. You need to go check it out. Well, I thought, yeah, I do. So I got in my Lincoln in my three-piece suit, and I drove on down to the villages to check it out. They took me for a tour. They took me to the room, took me to the nice bedroom, nice little front room, took me to the kitchenette, and I said, I don't need a kitchenette, I don't cook. They said, well, it comes with it. I said, well, okay, I'll take it. Took me out to the formal dining room, it was nice. Took me out to the bridge room where you play bridge. It was nice, everything was nice. They cooked for me, they cleaned for me, they washed my clothes. I asked them where was the dotted line. I would sign right away. And then guess what? I can bring my Lincoln. I can come and go as I please. I was really happy. So I came back to McRae, and I got a hold of Jack Earl, and I told him, sell it all. I was ready to go. So I moved into the villages. I got to come and go as I pleased. My family came and seen me as they pleased. Everything was so great until one day. My family showed up unannounced. They come to tell me that my son, that jogs every day, Jack Earl, had a massive heart attack and died. I know y'all thinking what I'm thinking. We don't bury our kids. Our kids bury us. I buried my Jack Earl. I broke my heart, it broke my spirit. And they said I died of a broken heart September the 14th, 1980, where I lay in Oak Grove Cemetery. Thank y'all for coming.
Well, first of all, I'm going to say, okay. I know that I'm short. I've been talked about by some of the former cast members from Oak Grove that John Coffey certainly is short. Well, you need to take into account there have been some great people that were short. Napoleon Bonaparte and Alexander Stephens, the Vice President of the Confederacy. So don't judge height too harshly. Now let's get on to the important part of the story. My name is John E. Coffey, and I'd like to say good day to all of you. I've been inactive for quite a while, up to 183 years. So I'll have to say it's good to see all of you out here. And it's delightful that you paid $10 to hear dead people talk. And in my day, this $10 was equivalent to $200. So thank you for coming, and I've been waiting on an audience for quite some time. You will notice that I am referring to my notes. This is my life, but as all of you in this audience can understand, you do forget a little bit. So, I was born in 1782 or 1784, whichever narrative you read. It definitely was in the 1780s. My grandparents came to this country from Ireland and settled in Virginia in Prince Edward County. My father, Peter Coffey Jr., was a tobacco planter and had a large plantation in the same county. He became a Revolutionary soldier and served in the 12th Virginia Regiment. After the Revolution, we moved to Georgia, where he purchased land in what became Hancock County. He had a cotton plantation based on the labor of enslaved Africans. I was only 3 years old when we moved to Georgia. The land we settled on was recently ceded by the Creeks. This land abounded in great forest and vast amounts of game. I grew up loving the outdoors and the sports associated with it. In my day, sports was hunting and fishing, unless you count the number of children you had as sport. My wife and I had 6. At 24 years old, I became captain of the state militia, District 110 of Hancock County. At the age of 25, I moved to Telfair County. This was 1807, and I developed my own plantation. I have a large plantation near Jacksonville on the Ocmulgee River. I was instrumental in choosing the name of Jacksonville, and it became the county seat in 1817. My plantation was across the road from present-day Blockhouse Baptist Church. I had 38 slaves to help manage this immense plantation. This was the year before I met and married Ann Penelope Bryan. We had a family of 6 children. One girl, Sarah Ann, became a Wilcox through marriage, and that is still a very well-respected name in our county. Sarah Ann had 5 brothers: Peter, Hill, Christopher, James, and John. John became a general in the war between the states. As a general in the Georgia State Militia, I was very influential in opening up this 800 square mile county. I did great pioneer work as well as keeping the Indians subdued. Much of this area was pathless forest, and a few companions and I opened up a road through this forest. This road was for the operation of my militia and supplies. Today, most of this road forms the boundary line of Berrien and Coffee County. The latter county was named in my honor, being created by a legislative act shortly after my death. The aforementioned Coffee Road was from the Arapahoe River to the Florida line. It was to afford rapid movement of troops and supplies in the Indian Wars, but ultimately a major factor in opening up the settlement of Southwest Georgia and West Florida. It became a major stage and mail route from Upper Georgia to these settlements. My record as a military and civic leader brought me prominence throughout the state. I was elected in 1832 to the 23rd Congress and re-elected in 1834 to the, as I said, 23rd Congress. I was elected a third time after my death. News traveled very slowly in those days. And also, this is Telfair County. We've been known to vote the dead, so why can't we elect the dead? I was buried on my beloved plantation in 1836. I lay undisturbed until the daughters of the American Revolution decided in their infinite wisdom that they would move my remains to Oak Grove Cemetery in McRae. According to things written, it was in 1921 or 1949. I rested peacefully on my own plantation where I had died in my own home. Well, they moved my remains, but there was one slight problem. The tombstone is for John R. Coffey. That is my cousin, but not me. My name is John E., and to tell you the truth, I've forgotten what the E stands for, but it's prominent. After my death, in appreciation of all my many contributions to the state, Coffee County was named after me in 1854. There was in latter years a state park, General Coffee, paying respect to my many accomplishments. There is a Coffee, Georgia, in Berrien County. And who knows why one of our favorite drinks was called coffee. Could be after me, who knows. It's been a pleasure to tell you about my life today. Being in the ground for 183 years, you relish the opportunity to talk to anybody, much less a crowd. So, and dead people do talk. We have lots to say if you'll just remember our lives. The confusion of dates is correct on my cenotaph in Washington, D.C., in the Congressional Cemetery. Come see me sometime. We'll talk. And one other thing, this is not me. I don't know that I ever went to Tennessee, and I know I wasn't in the war. But it's bad enough being dead, but then they give you dead flowers. Thank you for coming.
Good afternoon. How are you today? My, how things have changed in 20-some odd years. Really didn't expect to see a crowd this big today. My name is Robert F. Jackson, affectionately known as Fess. Born on March 28, in the year of 1914. Graduated from Ballard Normal High School in Macon, Georgia, in the year of 1931. Went from there and received my degree in 1934 from, it's been quite a while, so I've got to remember all of these things. Graduated from Morris Brown with a degree in mathematics and social sciences, with major in mathematics and social sciences. Came to Telfair County to teach in the year of 1938, to teach and coach. And boy, did I have a wonderful time. And as fate would have it, in the year of 1939, I married the love of my life on December 10th, Miss Willie Mae Henley Jackson, of course. Together, we had 3 children, Robert Jr., Kenneth, and Dorothy. And boy, am I proud of those children. Proud is probably to say the least. Well, as time has gone on, I became the principal, assistant principal, at the Central School In the year of 1957, after serving as assistant principal under Mr. J.H. James, I became principal after his death. It was during those years of consolidation and desegregation. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Thank you. During those times that I became principal, and I remained principal until 1976 after my retirement. Well, during those times, I encouraged my children to do as best as they could do. And in encouraging them to do as best as they could do, one of the things that I would always tell them was to be sure to eat all of your vegetables so that you can grow up to be just as good looking as I am. Another thing that I believed in was, if you spare the rod, you spoil the child. And if you don't believe me, when you get ready to leave here today, ask Mr. Fred Crawford about that. He and Millie Cook were having an argument in the lunch line in the lunchroom one day. And I went over to see what was going on. Well, I didn't ask many questions, but I tell you what, Fred can tell you that I didn't spare him not one lick. But as fate would have it, there were several people that I came in contact with and encouraging them, my students. I would encourage them to be the best that they could be in everything that they did. And in doing so, I would like to say today, thank you to Miss Rose Crawford for that wonderful article that you posted about me in the paper. I'm very appreciative of that. I'm appreciative of this Pioneer Historical Society, remembering such legendary and wonderful people who have walked in this great community. And as I prepare to leave, I want to talk about a few of my students. You know, I ran into several students, and me being a coach, and I'd like to think I was probably one of the best coaches that it was. Well, there were Olympic gold medal winners, teachers, entrepreneurs, and as I mentioned, there were some of my students who went on to play basketball. Two of them, as I think about it, was Samuel Hobbs and his brother, Tommy. They went on to play basketball for college. And I thought that was a wonderful thing. And after all, they had one of the best coaches that there was. But as I prepare to have a seat and enjoy the rest of the program, as I stated earlier, I've always encouraged people to be the best that they can be. And I want to encourage every one of you here in this room today to be as best as you can be. Remember that there are always people out there that are watching you. And trust me, when I say they're watching you, they're watching you. They're recording everything that you've done, maybe not with their phones, but in their minds. So as I prepare to take a seat today, don't just remember me for my name. Don't just remember me for the things that I've done, but please remember one thing. Be as best as you can be. Because after all, no one can beat you being you. Thank you.
Hello. It's great to see everybody this afternoon. My name is Daniel M. McRae. I was born not too far from here on a farm in a little town that is now called Scotland, Georgia. I was raised to work hard. I was taught the value of hard work at a young age, helping my parents on the farm. Their names were Duncan and Flora McMillan McRae. I had just so much experience with that when I turned 21, I decided that it was time to venture out on my own and begin a life for myself. So I became a teacher in Jacksonville, Georgia. Now, teaching was very rewarding to me, but not so much financially. So in addition to teaching, I opened up a general store there in Jacksonville. Now keep in mind, at that time, Jacksonville was the seat of the county. There was a lot of commerce there. A lot of people lived there because of the river. So this store that I opened proved to be very successful for me. Now, after I felt that I was established, at 35 years of age, I decided it was time to get married, that I should settle down. There was a young lady who I had my eye on, and her name was Susanna McRae. Yes, you heard correct, McRae. It was not an uncommon practice at that time for a McRae to seek another McRae in marriage. One reason for this is that there weren't many others available. I want to share with you the letter that I wrote to Susanna. I wrote this on April 7th, 1859. Miss Susanna, this letter will no doubt be read by you with surprise, as I am of the opinion that you're not expecting a letter from me. I have been thinking a long time on writing you and the subject of this letter, and I finally concluded to write and to face the consequences. If you are not engaged, will you allow me the extreme pleasure of forming a more intimate acquaintance with you? Will you allow me to visit you as not only a friend, but as a lover? I must say, and I say it without desire to flatter you, I look upon you as the most amiable of all my acquaintances. Now, Miss Susanna, please answer this letter by next week's post, and if you cannot agree to my proposition, please enclose this letter in an envelope and return it to me. Very truly yours, D.M. McRae. Well, it worked. We were married in December of that very same year. Now, not long after we married, the onset of war started. I enlisted in Alfred H. Colquitt's battalion. Now, this was a Georgia battalion, but I was stationed in Apalachicola, Florida. You might have heard of the siege of Apalachicola. Now, during this same time, something very interesting happened. I was informed that I had been elected to the state legislature. This was something I never solicited, something I never campaigned for, but basically it was given to me. And I did faithfully serve in that position. My wife, Susanna, and I went on to have 5 children. One of those children was the ancestor of Murphy McRae. And I'm sure many of you here today remember Murphy and Joe, that were very lifelong, they were lifelong residents and very instrumental in this community. Now, after the war ended, I came back home and I began to purchase land. It might surprise you who I bought a lot of my land from, my wife's father. My wife's father was Alexander Bain McRae. He was an early settler here, as my family was, coming here in the year 1815. So I have family that's been here over 200 years. I have one great-grandson that lives here now. I began to farm, of course. Turpentine industry was huge. I got involved in that. But I got word from Macon that something truly wonderful might be taking place. And that was building the railroad. Now, I began to inquire and to attend meetings, and I found out that, yes, indeed, the railroad would be coming through my section. So I decided to do what I could to help make that successful. So I built a depot on my land. The depot is still standing to this day. Now, after I built the depot, that did attract the railroad to come right through here. Now this was a Macon to Brunswick railway. We were first called Station 11, and I was the first depot clerk, I should add too. We began to grow, and Station 11 didn't have very much appeal, so it was decided that this area would be named McRae. Now, I built the depot. I owned a lot of the land that is now McRae, so I was honored that that name was chosen. And not just for me, but also for my family. Keep in mind, there were a lot of McRaes here at that time. So the railroad changed everything. Now remember, Jacksonville had been the seat of all the commerce and business, and this area was called backwoods by Jacksonville people. But we didn't stay that way. We grew by leaps and bounds. As you know, the Seaboard Railroad also came through, making us a sister city with Helena. By 1900, this was an extremely prosperous place. I built a beautiful two-story home on 3rd Avenue. It's been torn down since, but the Methodist Church playground that's right on the highway, you may have noticed steps that are going up to the sidewalk, and you may have wondered why they're there. That's where my home was. By, again, 1900, this was just unreal, the people that had come here. This was considered one of the most desirable places in the state. I began to sell off my land into city lots. And also, I want to share with you that I donated a lot of land to this area. I was extremely blessed, and I felt that I wanted to pass that on. I gave the land for this very school, this building that we're in now. I gave the land for the churches. Now, my parents were Scottish Presbyterians. I took great pride in helping to build the Presbyterian church here. And the schools. I don't want to leave that out because, again, education was very important to me. So I gave all the land for the schools. I figured later in life that I gave away as much land as I ever sold. I want to thank you for coming this afternoon and hearing some about my life and also hearing some about this city. God bless you and good day.
Well, hello. I was not expecting an audience today, but I am thrilled to see you. I am Ruth Grierson Winn Bell Lionetti, born the eldest child of John Winn and Alice Grierson Winn. One of my siblings was Blanche Butler Winn Wilcox, who married James Lee Wilcox of McRae. I graduated from high school and normal school, and then I began to teach mathematics, language arts, and shorthand. But it was not enough. You see, I always had music on my mind. I sang my first solo at age 2 in the Macon First Presbyterian Church. So I went on to Wesleyan. Camp Wheeler was a place near Macon where we had many of our local soldiers trained and staying. The young ladies of my age spent a lot of time putting on socials and teas and entertainment for the benefit of these soldiers. And at every opportunity, I sang. It was there that I met Lieutenant Theodore Bell. He was taken with my voice and my vivacious personality, and, well, he was a dear, dear man. He was deployed in World War I, but when he returned, we were married at my home in Macon, and we immediately moved to South Carolina, where his home was. And again, I taught, and it was still not enough. I began to take vocal lessons, and at every opportunity, I hit that stage and I sang. One night after a performance, my instructor told me that there was an anonymous person in the audience that was willing to finance my vocal study in Italy with an actual maestro on the condition that that person's identity remain a mystery. I know that newspaper articles at the time suggested that Theodore and I were thrilled at the opportunity. But the truth is, when I boarded that ship for Italy, I was a single woman. I wish I could say that he was impossible to live with, that we had grown apart, that he was a depressed and depressing soul. And it's true, he did spend the last few years of his short life in a sanitarium. But the truth is, he couldn't make me happy, and I could not please him. You see, I wanted a life. I wanted adventure. I wanted a career. But this was 1926, and women could not want those things. Women, nice women, did not board a ship unchaperoned to travel to Europe. I was a scandal. I was a ruined woman. My family was horrified. I didn't care. It sounds as if my future as a prima donna was secure, but life is rarely so simple. When I first got to Italy, I could speak English and Southern and French, but not a word of Italian. So I had to take a crash course. Now, the Italians I met were unfailingly kind and supportive, but my first vocal instructor nearly destroyed my voice by insisting that I prepare for heavy vocal deliveries. Luckily, we just found that out soon enough that my instrument was able to be saved. Then I got appendicitis. Well, my benefactor could no longer afford to sponsor me. So I found somebody else that was willing to take over my sponsorship. But after a while, he too had to bow out. I was given the decision. I could either go back home to Macon, or I could find some way to stay in Italy and stick it out. I stuck it out by teaching in Italian schools. I eventually made my way to the stage as the lead in Madame Butterfly. I began to perform at La Scala under the direction of the great Arturo Toscanini. That man was a complete contradiction. He would bemean us and berate us Yet he would lift us all to the greatest heights of performance we had ever done. He was a complete dictator in the theater, yet he was an open and vocal detractor of Hitler, and later of Mussolini when it became clear that he too was a fascist. The man was an absolute rogue. I aspired to be possibly the only prima donna at La Scala who did not sleep with the man to get the job. I did, however, show my usefulness by helping him set up amorous trysts with a friend of mine who was the wife of a British gent. In Madame Butterfly, I played a wronged wife who took my father's sword and committed suicide behind a screen. Later, when I had the lead in La Traviata, I was a popular courtesan who was suffering from consumption. In the last act, I collapsed gracefully into my lover's arms and died. In Pagliacci, I was Netta, the unfaithful wife of an insanely jealous man. He stabbed me. Oh, no, oh, stop! That, ladies and gentlemen, was a death scene to die for. I think it is probably true that when I actually died in 1990, I got more of the technical aspects of dying correctly, but I still don't think it was my best work. I auditioned to be the prima in the Metropolitan Opera in New York, but for some reason did not get the job. I think they should have paid more attention to my write-up as Netta. I was described as efficacious, pleasing, and secure, having a voice with a crystal quality, with a lively and dramatic development of the scenes. My acting was colored and precise. I went back to Macon for a while, but I felt Italy calling me back. In Italy, lunches were an hours-long affair, giving rise to long meals, naps, trysts, and in my case, long walks. As I left the theater one day, I encountered this man I had seen in the audience for all of my Italian career. He showed up at all of my performances bearing a bouquet of roses. Well, I was not interested in this man, you see. My interest was piqued, but I was not interested because I had a career, and I was not going to make that mistake twice. But as I met this man going out on my walk this day, he being an aristocrat and a banker, he was closing up his bank for the day for his lunch hour. And he asked if he might walk with me during my walk. I accepted. As we got to the center of the park, he turned to me and said, "May I walk with you for life?" I must admit, my resolve melted absolutely. It was such a romantic proposition. And that proposal, coming from this face, I mean, ladies, who could resist those bedroom eyes? I married Mariano, and as I was fearful, that did put an end to my career. I know that's contradictory, but so is love. And I loved Mariano. I worshiped him with all my heart. Shortly after we were married, World War II broke out. And Italy joined the Axis powers. Now, Mariano and I were not discommoded, except for the occasional Allied air raid. I told you that this marriage put an end to my musical career. But Mariano also wanted me to give up singing. I could give up the stage, but I could not give up singing. So when Mariano would leave in the morning, going to the bank, I would pack up my music case and I would walk to a house where I took voice lessons secretly with a maestro. One morning, shortly after I arrived, an Allied air raid started. Well, I was frantic. I had to get home. My instructor tried to get me to stay where I would be safer. But I was like, no, I cannot. I've got to go home. I cannot be caught here taking voice lessons when I am not supposed to. I darted out into the street, ducking from bombs, dodging between carts and horses, until finally someone stopped and took me home. The air raid had taken its toll, but my secret was still safe. Mariano's family had houses in Milano, Pesaro, and Como, and we spent most of World War II at his home in Como, which is right on the border with Switzerland. As I said, I was not terribly exercised about Mussolini. The trains ran on time, there was no crime in the street. But I was, after all, an American. And I could not watch American soldiers captured or injured. So for most of World War II, in Como, without the knowledge of my husband, I helped downed flyboys escape over the border into Switzerland. Now, I know in Telfair County history, I gave Mariano credit for assisting me. But the truth is, he knew nothing about it. And if he had known my particular method for helping these young men, he would have been horrified. You see, the downed pilots were told that the Senora Americana would help them escape. They would meet me at the Fountain Monumental. They would approach me, sit down beside me. I would wrap my apparently loving arms around them, nestle my head down on their shoulder, and we would stroll to the border, two star-crossed lovers. One day when I was sitting there with a young pilot, the Gestapo arrived, skulking around. I grabbed my ever-present shawl, threw it over both of our heads, grabbed his face, pulled him in, and kissed him passionately, as if both of our lives depended on it, which of course they did. After the Gestapo left, we arose and canoodled our way to the border. I am sure that those people that noticed my outrageous behavior with so many young men must have drawn some derogatory conclusions about my morals or my husband's charms. Now, I know this sounds like a fantasy. some tale an old woman would make up, but I have here the commendation from Field Marshal Alexander of the European Theater Allied Forces. After that, we came back to Atlanta, where Mariano ran a laundromat. And I don't think he was particularly happy doing that. He was kind of resentful. In 1960, we moved back to Italy, where I stayed until 1977 when Mariano died, and my niece, Ruth Mazel, convinced me to move to McRae. She had the whole family at the airport in Atlanta, but I had missed my connecting flight in New York. So I had been in Italy so long that while I was stranded in New York, I forgot I could speak English. Ruth is in Atlanta, desperately, frantically asking questions about the whereabouts of her 80-year-old aunt. And I am in New York asking many, many questions about my luggage, and all in Italian. I did finally make it to McRae, where I moved into the Wilcox house, which is across the street from the McRae Presbyterian Church, and Griff and Allison Mazel live there now. I walked across the street to that church for services for 10 years. Here is the 1988 homecoming photograph from that church, and here I am, just happy to be there. And I'm happy to be here with you all as well. Thank you for coming to see me. I hope you had as good a time as I did.
We want to thank all of you for being here today. We hope you've enjoyed our presentation. I want to commend our crew who have put in 2 or 3 months getting this program prepared. At this time, I'd like to recognize them if they're ready to open up the curtain. I think they're fighting over a place to stand. Let's give them a big hand. Now I promise them 2 bows, so let's keep up the applause. At this time, I'd like to recognize the director of the program, Peggy Edwards.
I just want to thank y'all for your support in behalf of the Pioneer Historical Society, and just recognize our cast. I want to just kind of go alphabetically, if y'all don't mind. But Mary Della Bell. She was very reluctant in accepting my invitation to play General Coffee, but I think she's done an awesome job and has been so entertaining. And we thank you very much, Mary Della. We love you. Next, I want to introduce and recognize Joe Curtis. Joe Curtis has been doing Judge Graham for 3 different appearances. He's done a marvelous job. He even looks judicial, doesn't he? Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it very much. Next, I want to talk about Norwood Davidson. And Norwood is just probably Daniel McRae. Yeah. Every time he has done this performance, we learn something new about McRae. It's probably more than we really wanted to know, but we thank you, Norwood, for the history lesson. Has been one of our very first performers when we started Walk Through the Cemetery, is what we used to call it. And she has portrayed 3 different characters. She has done 7 performances. And her last 2 that she's done today, which was Necia Cotter and Essie McGinty, she's so creative and she's so authentic that we really want to thank her a lot for her effort. Laurel Straughan. She is our professional entertainer. She has done 3 characters. She has done 7 performances. We've used Laurel as our guide to tell us how to perform on stage. She's given us tricks about performing on stage in front of an audience that many of us have not done before. So we thank you, Laurel, very much for your support. Tammy and Marty Thompson, our couple. You should be together. We want to thank you so much. Y'all have brought the relationship in your marriage to Edna and Bud. And I think you've done a marvelous job. We thank you for your efforts. We also want to thank them immensely because they have come for a grant to match all of the sales that we've done today. So we're very excited for their support. And lastly, but not because he's last, only because his last name starts with a W, we have Michael Wesley. He graciously, this is his first performance, he graciously accepted the role for Professor Jackson, and in 4 weeks, he has put together an honest, sincere presentation of who Professor Jackson really was. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it so much. I would like to ask all of you to come down here, and if y'all want to come up and meet them and talk to them about their characters or themselves, please take the time to just talk to them. Thank you.
On the floor.